All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to our last cram before the finale for AP Physics C Mechanics. My name is Sam. It's great to be with you tonight. We're going to give everyone about a minute to jump on, and then we will get started. Tonight is a little bit different than all of the other crams we've done so far. Tonight is all about the test. So we are going to talk through some tips and tricks for the multiple choice section, for the free response section. We're also going to spend some time just, going over the format of the test so you know exactly what to expect next week. Kristen is here with us. Kristen is our lovely Physics C Mechanics TA. She is awesome and has been helping out all of us as we prep to gear up for the test. So if you have questions or comments, I feel like tonight especially, every one of these crams is meant to encourage conversations between everyone here. But I feel like tonight especially, as we're going over some tips and some tricks, in the discussions, throw in what you've heard, because I think that the hive mind, the collective mind of all of us together trying to do well on this test is going to be important. So let's get going. Today, like I said, have a couple of different tips and tricks for you, and then we'll talk about the test and things like that. So as we get started, as always, just a reminder that the stream is being recorded. So if your name is anywhere, it might appear on our website, YouTube, etc. Just be ready for that. And then I have a special addition to our crams tonight because we are doing a fun little contest. So I'm going to play this video. And it's just about a minute long before we get started, just to show you something cool that's going on with Legible right now.
How do you win? You just gotta post about the AP experience on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter. Use the hashtag YesWeCram and with Fiveable and tag Fiveable. So one person will win every single day, and this is how you can win. It is going to be a group of students who actually judge the winner. They will pick the winner. This is how they're going to choose. It has to capture the AP experience. Do they look at that post and think like, that's 100% what this is? Is it creative? Is it funny? Does it have a really awesome song in it or really good use of some sort of meme? Anything. Do we see creativity and engagement? How many likes do you have? That literally is going to help you win. The more likes, the more likely you are to win. And then finally, does it incorporate 5 goals? Is it in the caption, what you're wearing, in something that you're doing? How have you incorporated 5 goals into it? So this is how you can win. A couple of quick notes. Make sure you follow Think Fiveable so that we can DM you if you won. You can post as many times as you want. You could post today, tomorrow, every day, as many times during the day as you want, but you can only win once. So keep that in mind. And finally, some of our best social interns came from this contest last year. So if you're really awesome at social media and you're looking for an internship, show us what you've got because we want to hire you. So I can't wait to see your posts. See you on the flip side. Good luck on your exams. Talk to you later.
Great. Okay, so definitely you should enter the contest. I think it's a really fun addition for as we're gearing up for the exams in the next week or two. Great. Oh, hold on. Oh, sorry. Okay. Great. So I think that Amanda did a great job, obviously, just plugging this. But if you haven't yet followed Think Fiveable on all of the social medias, you definitely should. There's been a lot of content, especially as we're geared up, more and more stuff is coming out to help. We're here to help. Okay, so in this stream, we are going to do 3 things. The first one is just talk through the exam format. So we're going to talk through what to expect in terms of number of questions and timing and all that stuff. We'll also dig into the equation sheet a little bit. I think if you've come to any of the previous crams, we've used different equations and I've pulled them out of the equation sheet, but we haven't looked at it as a whole. So we're going to do that tonight. Then in the second part, we are going to really dig into some tips and tricks. So we'll talk about multiple choice first, and then I've got lots of free response tips and tricks for you from there. So as we get started, before I actually dive into the into the exam format, I thought I'd just get a pulse of where we're at. So I'm going to open up a poll, and really I just want to know how you're feeling about the test right now. So your options, I tried to kind of make them all over the place. So your options are so ready, you can't wait, like give it to me now. You need to study, but you're feeling pretty confident. And like iffy, maybe okay, maybe not great, kind of in that middle ground, or just like not good at all. Lot of work to do between now and next week. So take a second and tell me where you're at. And then we'll talk about the exam format. Great, so we've got a couple people in. Take another 10 seconds or so if you'd like to vote. Okay, great. So I wanted to show you what you all said. So I wanted to show you that a lot of us, most of all of us that have voted are in that middle ground, right? So in that like need to study but feeling pretty confident, or in that like maybe okay, not great. So my message here is that you're not alone. No matter how you're feeling right now, you are not alone, and we are here to help. And please, 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 not just these crayons. I mean, these crayons are great, but use the Discord and use all our resources here to help as we are in this kind of crunch time, because you are not alone, and we are all in this together. So great. With that, let's actually dive into probably what you're here for, which is the actual like what's going on with the test. So first, just what's it going to look like? So just to make sure that everyone's on the same page here, there's two different types of exams happening. There's 2 sessions of the paper exams happening in May, and then there's a digital exam in June. Within those exams, the first section of 2 is the same setup, right? So it's going to be multiple choice. We can see here it's 35 questions. You've got 45 minutes to do it. So that's like a little bit over 1 minute per question, and it's half of your final exam score. If you're taking the paper exams in May, so whether it's the one next week or later, section 2 is going to be a free response. So it's 3 questions, also 45 minutes. The whole test is an hour and a half, right? 3 questions, 45 minutes, and it's also 50% of your exam score. Now, 2 important things. The first one is that you can use a calculator. So when it says for function, it just means like a add, subtract, multiply, divide, like a super basic calculator. You can use a scientific calculator, or you can use a graphing calculator throughout the whole test. So definitely between now and when you take the test, have a calculator. And then the second thing is that they're going to give you an equation sheet. So we're going to go into that equation sheet as part of our cram today. The only difference between the paper exams and the digital exam is section 2 is also multiple choice. So like that's a little funky, but I think for hopefully most of us that are here right now are thinking towards that one of those paper exams in May. And so we'll talk about multiple choice and free response today. Okay, and then for the actual breakdown of the units. So if you look, there are 7 units on this test. This comes from the Fiveable website. So there's lots of more info on the Fiveable website. There's a lot of content and things there, but this is the unit breakdown. So it's a summary of what the different units are. And then what I think is interesting, or probably the most important for you priority-wise, is the breakdown of how much of the test is each of these topics. So if we take a look, something like Newton's laws of motion, so that's like forces and stuff, right, is going to be between 17 to 23% of that multiple choice score, whereas Unit 7 is 6 to 14%. So the thing that I'm taking away from this is priorities. So we've got only so much time to study and to get ready. You should be picking out the things that are higher percentages if you've got to prioritize, because those are more likely to be on the test. I will also say that I put stars here. very, very frequently, not always, but frequently, the 3 units that I've starred here are featured in the free response questions. So there's like pretty much always some sort of forces, Newton's laws of motion involved in the free response. Very, very frequently, you see some work, energy, power, and then very, very frequently, you see some sort of rotation. So definitely encourage you, if you need to prioritize, look at those units and spend time working on those if you need to pick 1 or 2 things to study on a given day. Great. So now I want to just walk through the equation sheet with you. So I'm going to change my tab. You'll get a little peek behind the curtain. So you can actually see me for a second. Hello. I'm going to change my tab and just walk through the actual equation sheets with you. Hold on. Let me. There we go. Okay, I'm gone again. Okay, so the equation sheet is used for both the mechanics test and it's also used for the electricity and magnetism test. So there's parts of this that we care about and there's parts of this, at least for this test, that we don't care about. And there's 3 pages to it. So the first page here is a bunch of different constants, some of which we care about, some of which we don't, are symbols for a bunch of the different units that some of which we care about, some of which we don't. You can see that there's some trig here for common angles. So like that the sine of theta at the different common angles here, it gives it to you. There's some prefixes in case we need to convert from it's usually giving it to you and what you need, but like sometimes centimeters to meters might be one. And then just some kind of like assumptions and rules that this one, you've been doing this all your studying. So like that part you kind of don't have to read. But the ones here on this first page that I wanted to point out, you are given big G, the universal gravitational constant here. You're given little g, 9.8. I would think at this point you probably have that memorized, but if not, it is here for you. And really, that's kind of like the big ones for this test. A lot of these are really for E and M, but these constants are here for you. On the second page here, you can see that the different equations are here. So it's probably the page that you're most familiar with. And the mechanics ones are on the left, right? So you do have like definitions for all of the different symbols, and then you've got a bunch of different equations. So one thing you could do as you're studying is use this equation sheet as a guide. So at some point between now and when you take the test, I would go through this page of the equation sheet, which you can just Google. It's on the College Board website, not behind any sort of like login wall or anything. So like it's super accessible. Go through this equation sheet and just make sure that you know what each of these equations are and like a situation where you would use them. So like I look at these first 3 and I'm like, oh, those are the kinematics equations. I'm going to use those when we're talking about motion, right? And then I look in this equation and I say, oh, that's Newton's second law. That's a force equation. That's where I'm going to use that and go through and make sure that you know what each of these equations are. And if you don't, that's a good place for you to fill in some gaps as you're thinking about preparing for the test. So that is one thing. What I would do with this part, which is the actual equations, this is the part you'll probably use the most on the test. It is here for you. Some people say to memorize all these equations. I don't think that you necessarily need to, but I do think that you should be familiar with the equation sheet and just know where to find them as you're going through the test. And then this last page is math. So as you're going through, if you happen to need a formula for an area or a circumference, or there's some nice little calculus reminders here as you're doing some calc on the test. Those are all here for you. I will also point out these vector products. So hopefully we know that some things we take dot products for and some things we take cross products for. And really, when we're doing that for the magnitude, really, we know that the difference is whether it's a cosine or a sine. And if you forget that, it is here for you as well. So this equation sheet is full of little gems. You just have to know where to look for it. and is a really good base to study if you're like, I don't even know how to know if I know everything. One way to do it is to take a look at this equation sheet. So that is my chat about that. Great. So let me pause here for a second. I'm going to switch back my tab. And then we are going to move on, and we're going to start talking about the multiple choice and the free response tips and tricks. However, before we do that, another status check-in moment. I would like to know, we're actually going to do two. Part of I think as we're going through and gearing up for the test at this point is like definitely studying and definitely, you know, hearing these tips and tricks, but also just like remembering to breathe and like and find some fun as we're doing this too, right? So we're going to do two. So I'm going to ask you a serious question, and then I'm going to ask you a fun question. So serious question first. Which part of the test are you more confident in? Notice that I put those little stars next to more, because some of you might be like, I don't know that I'm confident in any of it. And that's okay. That's why we're here, right? But I would love to hear, take a second and vote if you would, just which one are you more confident in? Are you more confident in the multiple choice section or the free response section? Take a second and vote. All right, if you're going to vote, take another 15 seconds or so. All right. Okay, so we are definitely split, but again, I think more of us are feeling more confident in the multiple choice. And that's great. That is typically what happens in my past experience. So we're actually going to spend most of our time today talking about the free response. But definitely both are important, and we'll spend spend some time talking about each. Great. So let's do the fun question. I have some would you rathers here. Let's do this one. So take a second to vote on this one. Would you rather be forced to dance every time you hear music, or be forced to sing along to any song that you hear? Take a second and vote. Gotta find the fun, y'all. Things are getting serious. We gotta find the fun. Ooh, it's a runaway winner. If you're gonna vote, take another 5 seconds. Okay, for those that voted, most definitely, everyone voted sing along to any song I hear. I think I would pick that too. Nice work. Okay, back to business. Okay, so multiple choice tips and tricks. So first, just like what's going on with this multiple choice section? Let's talk about it. I think that the overall goal of the multiple choice section is really to test your overall knowledge base. So it's less about like going deep into one topic, and it's more talking about a little bit of everything that's involved in the course, right? So in order to do well on the multiple choice, you've got to know a little bit about everything. For these multiple choice questions, it's going to be could be a couple different things. First one is like a quicker calculation. So it's going to be like apply a formula, do 1 or 2 steps, get an answer. So right off the bat, I am here to tell you that if it is taking you a long time to answer a multiple choice question, if you're like, this is like a huge net force equation or a huge problem, if it's taking a long time, take another look. There's probably a faster way to do it. Another thing that happens in multiple choice a lot is interpreting graphs, right? So they'll give you a graph and they'll ask you, you know, either one question, or frequently when it's a graph, it's like 2 or 3 questions about that graph, using both the graph itself and then kind of like what you know about the topics that are on the graph. I feel like when I see graphs, at least I always think of like impulse momentum, or work and energy, things like that for graphs, but it really could be anything. The last thing is conceptual questions. So here I wrote a list of just kind of like your big hitters, big concepts that you're definitely going to see in the multiple choice, and really you're probably going to see kind of all over the test. Newton's second law, it's a huge one, right? There's a whole unit on it. It's the biggest percentage. Newton's second law, being able to write those net force equations, going to be huge. Conservation of energy and momentum. Both of those are really also really important big topics. And so being able to apply those both conceptually, thinking about it, and then also the math that goes with it. And then XY independence. This isn't like the name of one specific topic, but this idea that we solve things separately in the X direction and in the Y direction always comes up. And I feel like it's a lot of the time coming up in multiple choice. So just remembering that we have to keep X and Y separate as we're solving problems. So this is something that the AP releases, College Board releases, talking about what the different types of questions are on the multiple choice. So there's 7 science practices that go with this course. And maybe if you're taking it at school, your teacher talks about these explicitly, but I feel like I don't normally. I'm very not good at that. So I always want to just bring it in here. So there's 7 different science practices that go on the multiple choice section, and you can read them. But the takeaway here is that you're going to get different types of questions. Some of them are going to be, the visual representations are like free body diagrams and vectors and things that you would look at pictures, right? Visual pictures of what's going on. Question and method. I would say that's a lot of time has to do with like in an experiment, how you would do that question and method. You can see there's not weighting is very small there, right? There's not going to be a ton of those. There is going to be more data analysis. So giving you data, asking you questions about it. Theoretical relationships is the big one. So that's just another way to say the concepts, the theory, right? The concepts that go between numbers or between different topics. Mathematical routines, that's using formulas and solving problems. And then argumentation is like those questions that are like, if this happens, then what happens to the kinetic energy? Or things like that, where it's like you have to argue or think about what happens next in a situation. So here are your tips. So let's talk about each of them. So the first one, know the equation sheet. Right off the bat, if you haven't been practicing with the equation sheet, do some of that this week. Know where the different formulas are on the equation sheet. Even if you're like, I think I know them all. I think I memorized them all. I think you should still know the equation sheet, because you don't know. I mean, as much as we're all like ready to go on this test, you might get there and you might just like have a brain freeze for one of them, right? So just know the equation sheet, know where they are, know what the different symbols mean, so you don't have to spend time on the test being like, okay, I need to talk about momentum. What's the symbol for momentum? Oh, it's P. Okay, let me find an equation with P, right? So know where the different equations are in the equation sheet and know your symbols, so that way you know what you're looking for. Next one, read the question fully and pull out all the information given first. So sometimes these questions will sneak in really important information at the very end of the question. So spend time, spend the extra couple seconds it takes to read the whole question and pull out all of the information that you think is important. Don't just read the first sentence and go for it. Read the whole thing. Just so that way you're not stuck, and then 2 minutes later you go back and you're like, oh, I didn't read the second sentence. That would be sad. So that's what I have to say about that. So the next one should take you about a minute max to solve each problem. So I said this before, but if it's taking you more than 75 seconds or so, then there might be a faster way. So I think I frequently see this when we're thinking about it, and things like finding the acceleration, and people are trying to use forces and then use the kinematics equations and do all these multi-steps, when really if we just used either force and energy, or like energy and then a kinematics equation. Something faster will help. Another big one, do the questions that you know first. So when you get your test, skim through all of them, do the ones that are bank, the ones that you're like, yeah, I got that, no worries. I'm super confident in this one. Do those first. Then go back and work on the ones that you have to think about. That will serve two purposes. The first one is you're going to just like increase your confidence, right? Because you're like, oh, I already did half of it, or however many you do. I've already got some in the bank. I already know that I've gotten some correct. And then the second thing is just timing. That way you know what the whole test looks like. You know what you've got in front of you, and you can manage your time appropriately. Another one, process of elimination is your friend. So be thinking about the numbers. Frequently, you're gonna, the number that's correct is not gonna be the biggest or the smallest. It's not always true. Sometimes it is, but be thinking about like, does this biggest number, does that make sense? Does the smallest number make sense? Are there any statements, if it's more of like a conceptual question, are there any statements that like just in physics are wrong? So get rid of the ones that you know are wrong. That way, hopefully you can get to an answer that you are confident and that you think is right. But at least if you're guessing, if you end up guessing, you've increased your chances of guessing because you've eliminated a couple that don't make sense. Next one, use 10 meters per second squared for G, definitely. That will both simplify your math, and you're going to get an answer that's close enough to know which letter to pick. So definitely use 10 meters per second for G. Don't worry about 9.8, just use 10 when you're calculating. And then the last one, don't leave any questions blank. You are not penalized for guessing wrong. So as you get close to the end of the time, if you've got some that you don't think you're going to get to, put something down. Don't leave anything blank. Okay, so that is multiple choice. Let's pause again here and do a fun question. Got to keep the mood light, y'all. So here we go. Here's another poll. Would you rather never be able to eat warm food or never be able to eat cold food? Take a second and vote. All right, if you're going to vote, take another 5 seconds. Wow, we have a runaway. I feel like this was a harder one, and we have a runaway winner. Okay. Many of us said never eat cold food. I guess I agree, but I feel like it was a closer call, because if you could never eat cold food, then I couldn't eat ice cream, and that would make me sad. Okay, cool. So let us talk about free response. So again, we're going to start and just talk about what to know about the free response section. And then we'll spend a lot of time going over some tips and tricks. I've got multiple slides. Okay, so first to know. So while the multiple choice section is meant to test your breadth of knowledge, like your overall knowledge on lots of different topics, the free response questions the goal is to test the depth of your knowledge. So they're going to not ask you about everything, all of the different units, right? They're not going to hit all of them on the free response questions, but the goal is to make sure that you know how to deal with some of the topics in more depths. So we need to be able to do that, and we can. So in order to achieve this, the free response section, each question is going to have multiple parts. So you're going to see, there'll be 3 of them total, and we talked about that, but there'll be 3 of them total, and each one will almost definitely, I think always, have, an A, a B, a C, a D. Sometimes you're like, I want it to be over at D, and you keep going to E, F, G, H, whatever. So my point is that there's multiple parts. And within these parts, frequently, these questions will combine topics from different units together into one situation. So maybe the question will start asking you to draw free body diagrams and talk about forces. And then something will slightly change and they'll ask you about energy, or they'll ask you about kinematics, or they'll ask you about momentum. So that's, so in some ways bad news, because you do have to know a lot of stuff. But the good news is that in free response, you've got partial credit. And if there's one thing for free response that you are taking away from me tonight, it is that there is partial credit. Please, please, please do not leave things blank. And I'll say that a bunch of times. There is partial credit for the different parts. And the way that it's scored is on a rubric where you're given different amounts of points for each kind of part, each thing that you do. So sometimes even just writing the equation, even if you don't know anything else, but you know that it has to do with this equation, sometimes that will get you a point. So write stuff down for the free response questions. There are different types of questions that you'll see. At least one of them will be some sort of experiment that you'll have to either analyze data that's already been taken or design an experiment that you would do, but some sort of experiment question. Frequently, you'll see something that you'll have to derive, so a derivation. So that the question will say derive this rotational inertia, for example, or something like that. Frequently, you'll see a comparison. So that is not necessarily that you'll have to do math, but you'll have to look at the situation and determine if something is greater than or less than or equal to. And then some questions that I just call do you know your stuff questions. So can you calculate things? Can you write a net force equation? Can you solve for the acceleration? And I know I keep using force examples, but forces are just all over this test. So, we got to just know force. Got to know forces stuff. As far as the actual science practices, it is here for you. So I won't go through all of these again, but you can see, again, theoretical relationships, mathematical routines, those are going to be the biggest. And then there's this representing data and phenomena, which goes with this. One of the 3 free response questions will include an experimental or lab-based component. So you'll always have some sort of experiment that you're dealing with. Okay, so this and the next slide are a doozy, but they're important. So on these free response questions, they give you different directions, and the directions mean specific things. So I wanted to just spend some time talking about them, because if we don't understand what the question is asking, it's obviously A, going to be harder to answer it, but B, maybe we can save some time if you're doing something and you're trying to get an answer that's more in depth than what they're asking you for. So I'll talk about some examples as we go through these, but I do want to spend some time actually going through each of these task words. I hope you're ready. Okay, so the first one here is calculate. So calculate is what it sounds like. You need to do the math to find a number. That number might be in addition to some algebraic expressions. So sometimes it says you can include the constants, big G, or they don't give you a number for the velocity. You can include V, or you know what I mean? So you can sometimes include algebraic variables in your answer, but the idea here is to calculate what's going on and substitute numbers when you have them, and correctly label your units and your significant figures. I will say they're not usually super strict about significant figures, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, I wouldn't worry about it. That is not your priority right now, but definitely calculate as do math and get a number for an answer with a unit after it. Compare is sometimes it's a greater than, less than, equal to. Sometimes it's just give me a description or an explanation. So write a little bit about it, but you're always going to be looking at 2 situations, talking about similarities and differences. Derive is do some math, and usually it's going to be equations and it's going to be with letters, not with numbers. So use the variables, the different symbols for the different physics stuff. Do some math to get an equation or a law, and then that's your final answer. So a lot of times you'll see derive with either rotational inertia, so like derive the rotational inertia equation for whatever it is. Sometimes you'll see it with drag force, but this idea of like, this is a general formula, you need to show how you got to that formula using other formulas, basically. I guess that's how we describe derive. Describe is next. That's funny. So describe is exactly what it sounds like, providing descriptions or characteristics of what's going on. Determine is a more vague one. So it's just saying, come to a conclusion, but it doesn't have to be a calculate. So it's just determine is just after some sort of either just some like logical reasoning, some observation, or you can calculate to get an answer. So that's a more vague one. You don't always have to calculate when you see determine. You can also provide like a written answer. Estimate is what it sounds like. So that's, again, a little bit less precise. You estimate a lot of times when in like graphs and things like that, when you don't have like a pinpoint, you don't have a data point necessarily that goes on the axis, but you're going to kind of estimate the data point based on what you see in the graph. And it's going to be kind of a rougher calculation. You can see explain is the next one. So explain is a how or a why, right? So you could see explain how is analyzing the relationship, process, pattern, blah, 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 blah. Whereas why is the reason. So how is what's going on, why is why it's going on. So what's the reason behind it? But that's also more words, right? So like calculate, derive, maybe determine, maybe estimate. Those are going to be numbers, whereas like compare, describe, explain, those are going to be words. And maybe this is obvious, but I think it's important to go through just because, if you're just told to determine something, you don't necessarily have to calculate. And just using some sort of reasoning or observation in written form might be faster than actually going through and calculating it. So as long as you can explain it, you don't necessarily have to calculate if you see the word determine. There's another slide. I apologize. So if we see these next ones, justify is provide evidence to support whatever is going on in the situation. Label is hopefully fairly self-explanatory. You want to, usually it's like label the graph or something like that. One that I wanted to definitely point out is the difference between plot and then sketch or draw. Plot means that you actually have to make axes and numbers and plot your points. So this is in terms of graphs, right? So when you're plotting a graph, you have to either use the scale they're given or put a scale on your graph with units and plot your data points. Sketch or draw, you just have to draw the shape. So that won't take as long, right? So if you just see sketch or draw, don't spend time explicitly making your axes and your data points unless it asks you to. But sketch and draw, they're just looking for a shape, whereas plot, they're looking for you to actually plot that data. State, indicate, circle. Hopefully that's pretty self-explanatory. You don't actually have to, actually this is important. You don't actually have to explain. If you see state, indicate, or circle, you don't have to like give your reasoning. You can just say what it is. And then verify. Verify happens when they give you the answer and you have to go through and just like verify that it's correct. So again, this is sometimes, I keep thinking of rotational inertia because when we think about verify, maybe they'll give you the rotational inertia of the object and you have to verify that it's correct by going through the math to get there. Okay, that was a doozy. Okay, so let's talk about tips for the free response for a little while. So the first one, I said it once, I'm going to keep saying it. You need to know the equation sheet. That should be, if you are doing nothing else this week, maybe I said this with other things, but if you're doing nothing else this week, know the equation sheet. That way you're not looking for formulas. You're not looking to be like, what does P stand for? You know what's going on and you can use it as a resource, but you're not eating up time just trying to like figure out what's going on the equation sheet. I do have on here, if there's, some formulas that we use a lot. So like Newton's second law is a great example. The energy formulas. So, kinetic energy equals 1/2 mv squared. Potential energy is mg delta y. The formulas that you use a lot might be good to know them. That way you don't have to deal with the equation sheet, but that's only if you have time. And the more you study, the more likely you are to just have them, happen to memorize them as you go, because you just use them a lot. Second tip, just like with the multiple choice, when you open your free response, skim through the whole thing first. There's going to be 3 questions. Pick the question where you're most confident. Start with that one. That will both give you a little bit of momentum, no pun intended, and give you a chance to just settle in and start with something that you know. Each free response question should ideally take about 15 minutes to answer. That's give or take, and you've got 45 minutes for all 3. So maybe the first one that you're just cruising through doesn't take 15 minutes, but then the last one that you're struggling with takes 20. That's okay. But just as you're pacing yourself, if it's taking you, much longer than 15 minutes, just know that and see if we can adjust accordingly. Also, big takeaway, make sure that you show your work. So this is something that I don't know that everyone taking AP knows, but the people that grade these tests, vast majority of them are AP teachers. So they're AP teachers, they get together, they grade the test, and the teachers are looking for any reason to give you points. So show your work, put down your formulas. The more that you give them, the more likely that you are to gain a point or 2 here and there, even if you have like no clue what's going on. That said, you shouldn't go through and just like write down every equation on the equation sheet. That doesn't fly. But if you've got any sort of like inkling as to what direction to go in, even if you don't know the full thing, show your work and write down what you know, because really, 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 the graders are looking to give you points. Next, know those task words that we were just talking about. Don't do more than you have to. I feel like the big one that I always think about is graphing. Don't plot your whole graph if they just ask you for a sketch. That's a waste of time. And if they give you a graph in the problem, you're gonna need it. They don't just give you a graph and then you don't use it, right? So if you see something with a graph, make sure you use it. Next, keep a list of what info the question gives you. So as you're reading through the question, it's going to be helpful whether you want to underline or you want to just like make a list on the side of pulling out all of the relevant info that the problem gives you. That way you don't have to keep like researching in the text to find what you're looking for. You've got your list and you've got it more simplified. So that way it's easier to figure out, if you need a number or you need a topic or you need an equation, you've got kind of the simplified version of the problem as like a cheat sheet or a shorthand for yourself after you've read the problem once or twice. Okay, I do have more for you, but I'm going to pause again here, and we're going to do another fun question. So let me open up a new poll. Let me see which one do we have. Okay, would you rather be covered in fur or covered in scales? Take a second and vote. So we're doing one more. Well, actually, I think it's 2 more fun questions, but one more right now. Would you rather be covered in fur or covered in scales? Take another 10 seconds if you're going to vote. All right, so not a runaway, but we definitely have a winner. Most of us definitely said fur. I 1,000,000% disagree with the majority here and go with the scales people. And the reason is that I am allergic to most things that have fur. So I do not want to be allergic to myself. Great. Okay, more tips for the free response. Here we go. So I've said this before, I will say it again. There's partial credit, there's partial credit, there's partial credit. So write down the formula that you think you're going to use, write down a thought that you have about the problem, write down a vector that you know that goes with the problem. Even if you have no clue, see if you can answer at least some of it. And this is something that I think a lot of my students don't realize, and I have to be really, really, direct about. If you're looking at the free response and you don't know the answer to question A under it, so like say it's like A through E and you don't know A and you're like, I don't even know how to get A, but I do know how to do B or C or D, make up a number for A. Just be like, the answer to A is 10. Make up a number, write it in under part A, and then use that answer to do the rest of the question. So you're not going to get any points for part A, but that way you might get some points for being able to do B or C or D or however many other parts there are. So I'm going to say it again because I think it's something that a lot of people don't know. If you don't know the answer to one part, but the next part is dependent upon it, make up a number. Just give that as the answer, even if you know it's wrong, and then use that number for the rest of it so that way you can show what you know for the rest of the problems. Okay, next. Make sure you've got units in all of your answers. Sometimes the rubric will have a point just for having the correct units on your answers. So, before you turn it in or with just a couple minutes left, when you're checking your work, just make sure that all of your answers have units, because that is, that's easy points that you either just like slam dunk, you get it, or you don't have it and then you miss an easy point. Next, use dimensions to your advantage. So what I mean by that is like, we know that velocity is measured in meters per second. And we know that time is measured in seconds, or acceleration is meters per second squared. See if you can't reason out to the units that you want, your answer needs to be in, right? So if you're looking for an acceleration and your answer needs to be in meters per second squared, take the numbers that are in the problem, use their units to see if you can't like mathematically figure out how to get to the units that you want. It's not a perfect strategy, but if you're stuck and you don't have any clue, that is one thing that you could do to help you to figure it out. And as you're checking your work, if whatever time you have left to check your work, make sure that all of those units work out. That's one kind of trick to check your work as well. Another one, any sort of algebra heavy answer, leave it for last. Algebra takes a long time. And it's really, while it's going to be important and you're going to get a point or two for going through all the algebra and getting to an answer, leave the actual, like, a lot of algebra questions for last. So get your setup there and then just leave the setup where it is and then come back to it with whatever time you have left. Next one, sometimes they ask you to draw free body diagrams in the free response. It does explicitly say this on the free response, but I just want to say it here too. When you're drawing your free body diagrams, don't draw the components of the forces. So like frequently, if I'm thinking like box on a ramp or something like that, where you need the X and Y components of your forces to get an answer, don't draw them on the required free body diagram. You'll actually lose points. You're just drawing the forces that exist, not their components. If you need a free body diagram in order to solve the problem that has components on it, just draw a second one off to the side for you, not on like the official one. Draw a second one off to the side for you to draw the components on and solve it from there. Okay, and then I think this is the last specific free response tip. Write legibly, telegraph your answers, put boxes around them, circle them, draw arrows. Again, these are people that are grading your tests, right? They're typically AP teachers, right? So make it really obvious what your answer is and how you got there. Write legibly. Again, they just want to give you points, but you have to be able to read your answers in order to give you the points, right? So write legibly, telegraph your answers, box them, circle them, whatever you need to do to make them super obvious. Okay, so I've got a couple slides that are just kind of general suggestions, and then we're going to wrap up. So when you're looking at a problem, whether it's a multiple choice problem or a free response problem, when you're looking at a problem, here are some questions that you can ask yourself as you get started, especially if you're stuck and you don't know where to go. First one, what's the object doing? Really, really basic, but especially if you don't have a picture, if you want to draw a picture, just to kind of like figure out what's going on, that's a good first question. Second one, what direction is it moving in? And you know immediately that if it's moving in two directions, you need to find the X and the Y components, almost definitely, right? So think about what's it doing, what direction is it moving? Is it moving at constant velocity or is it accelerating? What's causing it to accelerate? So thinking about, that is a question to help you think about, like, are there forces happening in this problem? If it's accelerating, we know that there is some sort of net force causing it to accelerate. What is that net force causing it to accelerate? Is it moving in a straight line? Is it moving in a circle? Thinking about what's causing the object to move the way it is. And then there's really only a couple different types of problems that we see over and over. And there's other like small iterations of them, but really there's only a couple different types. Is it a motion problem? Is it a force problem? Is it an energy problem? Is it a momentum problem? And then kind of like as a subset within those four, is it rotating? Because if it's rotating, we know we've got that extra layer, right? So which of the four is it? And then is it rotating? As a general tip, see if you can use energy to solve the problem first. Energy is typically much faster because you don't, energy, things can go in all different directions and you can use energy. You don't have to worry about, the vectors of the different things. If you can't use energy, then think force and kinematics. And then just logistics here. So between now and whatever your test date is, do as many full-length practice tests as you can. That's going to be the best way to diagnose where you're at, what you need to study, what pieces you're missing. I have some links here, and I think you have access to these slides in the resource section on Fiveable. The College Board has some old tests that are just released to the public. I've been using a lot of these questions on our crams, but I think that seeing them, beginning to end all as one test is still super helpful. So the newest, which I know is like not that new, but the newest practice exam that's available that's not behind any sort of like login wall is the 2012 practice exam. So you can look at the link or you can just Google, AP Physics C Mechanics 2012 exam, and it will come up. There's also the 1998 exam. That's the next one that's available. And then the College Board has all of their past free response questions on their website. So I think everything except for 2019 and I guess 2020. So maybe it's from 2018 and before. But all of them are on there. And not only are the questions on there, but all of the scoring rubrics. So all of the, the things that the readers are using to score the tests, student sample work. So you can see some like a good example, an okay example, and a not so good example for each of the questions. So you can see what those look like. And then some comments by the actual like lead graders for these tests. So again, this link is here for you. Also, you can just Google like AP Physics C Mechanics College Board free response questions, and you'll be able to find the website. It is all there for you to use. You can see the answers. Everything is there for you to work on as you're studying. On the day of your test, couple of things, couple of tips from my experience. First thing, make sure you eat a good breakfast. Don't eat anything new that's going to upset your stomach. And I know that's like, you're like, Sam, chill out. But for real, like the worst thing that you don't want is like an upset stomach as you're taking this test because of food, not because you're nervous, right? Like real talk. So eat a good breakfast. Don't eat anything new or weird. Just, whatever you are normally eating for breakfast that feels good, eat that. Go to bed early the night before. If you come to the cram on Sunday, I'm going to tell you this a million times, but trust that by the time that we get to the night before and the day of your test, you've done everything you can. You've been working hard, and it's just going to be what it is, right? You got to just trust yourself that you can do it. Have your material set out before you leave. I know I probably sound like all of your adult humans when I say that, but it is important that you want to eliminate any sort of like stress or variable the day of the test, right? So have everything out, know where your calculator is, know where your pencils are, make sure that your calculator has good batteries in it. I have seen before people taking this test or any test like this, and then the batteries die in their calculator and then they're sad. So you don't want that to happen. So make sure you've got good batteries. And then this is just me getting on my soapbox, but remember that really it's just one test. It's going to be nice if you pass. It will be great. You'll have worked hard for it, but it doesn't determine your worth as a human or as a scientist or as a physicist, and you're already awesome, and it's going to be okay. So with that, just a couple of final things when you're stuck. So I know I say this every time if you've been to my previous crams, but when you're stuck, and know that on the test, there's going to be a point where you're going to get stuck, and that's just going to be okay. And we need to just like take a deep breath, live in it, and then follow the steps, right? So list what you know, list what you're looking for, draw a diagram. When you're stuck, draw a picture of what's going on, pull out the things that the problem tells you, take a deep breath, because I think that there's a moment of panic usually, right? So take a deep breath, trust yourself that you know this and you can do this, and you've been studying and you're here right now is it Monday? I think it's Monday. On a Monday night, here with us, getting all of these tips and tricks, and just know that you can do this. So with that, just only one, well, besides the test, I suppose, but only one upcoming Fiveable event. Our cram finale is this Sunday from 12 to 5 Eastern time. So I will be here with you in that finale. My plan is to hit all of the big topics from the class. So we won't do everything, definitely can't do everything in 5 hours, but we're going to hit the major topics. We're going to do a lot of this free response tips and tricks again, just so that way you hear it a second time. We are going to talk about exam format, and we're going to do some practice problems. I'm planning on doing a couple of full-length 15-minute timed free response practice problems, so that will be here for you. And here to answer questions and to be with you all as we're prepping for the test. The first sitting is Monday, right? So just here, I'm here, Kristen is here as you're studying, and really we're just here for you. I know we're in crunch mode now, but we believe in you and we are here to help. So if you would like to keep talking, Kristen is going to head over to Discord. Definitely jump on there and ask questions, throughout the whole week. Ask questions. We're here to help, here to really just do whatever we can do to help get you ready to go for next week. So I am excited. You've been working so hard, and I'm excited to see what you're going to do. I will stick around on here for a minute if you need to put anything in the chat, but otherwise I think we are done. So thank you so much for being here with me. Have a great rest of your evening. Head over to the Discord if you'd like. We'll keep the conversation going, and hopefully we will see you on Sunday. Thanks, y'all.